The fluorescent lights above the fryer flickered one last time before going dark, casting long shadows across the empty Burger King dining room. In that moment, Tanya Mitchell realized something terrifying. She had become invisible in her own life. 12 years of double shifts, 12 years of believing tomorrow would be different. 12 years of watching her reflection fade in the grease-stained steel counters until she couldn't recognize herself anymore. But tonight, as rain hammered against the windows and thunder cracked like a warning from God himself, invisibility was about to end in the most horrific way possible. Because sometimes when you've been silent for too long, when you've swallowed every betrayal and called it love, when you've worked yourself to the bone for people who saw you as nothing more than a paycheck and a fool, something inside you doesn't just break, it explodes. And what happened in those next few minutes would transform a tired fast food worker into a name whispered with equal parts horror and understanding. A story that would force America to ask itself one uncomfortable question. How much can a human heart endure before it stops being human at all? The smell that night was different. Sure, there was always grease, always that mix of burned fries and mop water that clung to her uniform no matter how many times she washed it. But tonight, underneath all that, Tanya swore she could smell something else. Something like desperation mixed with the metallic tang of a storm rolling in. Her hands moved automatically, wiping down the same counter she'd wiped 1,000 times before. Her mind somewhere far away, probably in that place where dreams go to die slowly. She was thinking about the electric bill that was overdue again. About Reggie's latest promise that this time, baby, I swear the music thing is gonna take off. She was thinking about how her feet hurt so bad she couldn't even feel them anymore, just a dull throb that had become as familiar as breathing. What she wasn't thinking about was that in less than an hour, her entire life would detonate like a bomb that had been ticking for over a decade. Hila was dancing again by the soda machine, phone in hand, probably texting some man who was actually texting her back, actually showing up when he said he would. Tanya watched her for a moment, this young girl with her whole life still ahead of her, still believing in happy endings and true love and all those fairy tales that Tanya had stopped believing in somewhere around year 5 of her marriage. There was a time when Tanya would have called Isla her little sister, would have given her advice about men and life and how to protect your heart. She'd even lent her money when times got tough, $200 that disappeared like smoke, never mentioned again, never paid back. But Tanya didn't mind them because that's who she was. The woman who gave and gave and gave until there was nothing left but an empty shell going through the motions. She had no idea that the girl she called sister was about to become the match that lit the fuse when her phone buzzed on the counter. Tanya almost didn't check it. She was tired, bone, deep tired, the kind that sleep can't fix because it comes from the soul being worn down to nothing. But something made her look, maybe intuition, maybe God giving her one last warning, maybe just bad timing disguised as fate. The photo loaded slowly, pixels forming into shapes that her brain refused to process at first because surely this couldn't be real. 2 people pressed together in a parking lot she recognized immediately, the same parking lot she walked through every single day. A man wearing Reggie's jacket, the one she'd bought him last Christmas with money from her overtime shifts. A woman with Isla's laugh, Isla's hair. Isla's hands wrapped around someone else's husband like she had every right to be there. Tanya's first breath after seeing that photo felt like inhaling broken glass. Her second breath didn't come at all. The world went quiet in a way that was almost peaceful, like being underwater, like drowning without the panic. She could see Isla still dancing, could hear the fryer hissing its eternal song, could feel the weight of her visor pressing against her forehead where a headache was beginning to bloom. But none of it felt real anymore. It was like watching her life happen to someone else, some other woman in some other Burger King who was about to make some other terrible choice. She texted back with trembling fingers asking who sent it, but the answer didn't matter because the photo itself was the only truth she needed. Reggie's hands cupping another woman's face the same way he used to cup hers back when he still pretended to care. Ila's body melted against his like she belonged there. Like 12 years of marriage and sacrifice and holding together a man who kept falling apart meant Absolutely nothing at all. The rain outside picked up, drumming against the roof like fingers tapping impatiently, like the universe itself was waiting to see what she would do next. Tanya tried calling Reggie, but it went straight to voicemail, his recorded voice still smooth and charming, still full of that confidence that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. "You know what to do, baby. Leave a message." She wanted to scream into that phone, wanted to leave a message that would shatter him the way she was shattering right now, but her throat had closed up completely. All she could do was whisper, "Yeah, I'll leave a message," before hanging up and staring at her reflection in the steel counter one more time. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, hollow-eyed and defeated, a ghost of the girl who believed in forever and meant it. That's when the door chimed. That little bell above the entrance that usually meant another tired customer wanting another meaningless meal. But this time it meant something different. This time it meant the end of everything. Reggie stumbled in first, drunk as usual, smelling like whiskey and cologne that wasn't his, rain dripping from his jacket onto the tiles Tanya had just mopped. And behind him, trailing like a shadow that should have stayed hidden, Camila. Her hair was messy in a way that told its own story. Her lipstick was smeared across her mouth like evidence of a crime she didn't even try to hide. And when her eyes met Tanya's, there was a flash of something, guilt maybe, or fear, or that specific kind of shame that comes from being caught doing something you knew was wrong all along. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched out like taffy, thick and suffocating, broken only by the eternal hiss of the fryer that had been the soundtrack to Tanya's entire adult life. She stood there behind the counter, her hands resting on the steel surface she'd cleaned 1,000,000 times, and looked at the two people who just walked into her workplace like they owned it, like they had every right to bring their betrayal into the one place she'd managed to keep some small piece of herself alive. Reggie tried to smile, that same lazy grin that used to make her forgive him for anything, but tonight it looked different. Tonight it looked like a mask slipping off to reveal something uglier underneath. "Baby," he started, his voice slurred and pathetic. "It ain't what you think." And that's when something inside Tanya Mitchell, something that had been bending and bending for 12 straight years, finally snapped clean in half. Her voice when it came out was too calm, frighteningly calm. The kind of calm that comes right before a hurricane tears everything apart. "Y'all hungry, or you just here for the late shift?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Reggie blinked, confusion crossing his face because he'd expected tears, expected screaming, expected the Tanya who always backed down and always forgave. What he got instead was someone new, someone who'd been living inside her all along just waiting for permission to come out. Ayla started crying immediately, those easy tears that pretty girls learn to use like weapons, but they meant nothing now. "Tanya, I swear I didn't mean," she began, but Tanya cut her off with a look that could have stopped time itself. "Didn't mean what?" "Didn't mean to sneak around behind my back? Didn't mean to crawl into my husband's car after I trained you, helped you, treated you like family?" The younger woman pressed herself against the counter, sobbing harder, but Tanya felt nothing. All the sympathy she'd ever had, all the forgiveness she'd stored up like ammunition for moments just like this, had evaporated the second she saw that photo. Reggie tried to step forward, reaching for her arm with those hands that used to make her feel safe and now just made her feel sick. "Baby, stop. We can talk about this." But talking was done. Talking was what Tanya had been doing for 12 years while he lied and cheated and took and took and took until there was nothing left to give. "Talk?" Her voice cracked like thunder. "You had plenty of time to talk before you threw everything away." The fryer beeped behind her, signaling another batch was ready, and that's when she felt it. That pull toward the heat, toward the bubbling oil that had been part of her life longer than Reggie had, toward the only thing in this building that had never lied to her or betrayed her or made her feel like she was crazy for trusting it. She turned slowly, almost dreamlike, and looked at the fryer. Golden oil bubbled and popped, steam rising in small clouds that caught the fluorescent light and turned it into something almost beautiful. Her reflection wavered on its surface, distorted but somehow more real than anything else in the room. Behind her, she could hear Reggie saying something, his voice rising in pitch, fear creeping in around the edges. Tanya, don't do anything stupid. Stupid. That word again. Like loving him had been stupid. Like working herself to death had been stupid. Like believing in promises and vows and the idea that loyalty meant something had all been one long, stupid mistake. Her hand reached for the metal basket, feeling the heat radiate through the handle, feeling her pulse slow down to something steady and certain. This wasn't rage anymore. This was clarity. This was 12 years of silence finding its voice in the worst possible way. You walked in here, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, and brought your dirt into the one place I still had peace. Illa backed toward the door. Mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers, her voice breaking as she begged. Tanya, please, I'm begging you. Begging? The word tasted like ash in the air between them. Tanya wanted to laugh because she'd done plenty of begging herself. Begged Reggie to be faithful, begged him to get a job, begged him to just see her as something more than a paycheck with a body attached. And where had all that begging gotten her? Right here, standing in a Burger King at midnight with her hands wrapped around a basket of boiling oil while the two people she'd trusted most in the world looked at her like she was the monster. Maybe she was. Or maybe monsters are just regular people who've been pushed past the point of no return. Reggie lunged forward, trying to grab her wrist, his voice desperate now. Baby, stop, let's go home, we can talk this out. But home wasn't home anymore. Home was just another place where she'd been made to feel small and worthless and invisible. She lifted the basket from the fryer, the oil shimmering like liquid gold, like melted down dreams and broken promises. In that split second before everything changed forever, Tanya Mitchell saw her entire life flash before her eyes. Not the good parts, not the wedding or the early days when love felt real, but all the nights she cried herself to sleep. All the times she defended him to her family. All the double shifts she worked while he slept in until noon. She saw every lie, every excuse, every moment she'd chosen to believe in him instead of believing in herself. And standing there with that basket in her hands, feeling the heat kiss her skin like a lover who actually showed up, she made a choice that would define her for the rest of her life. You always said you wanted fire in this marriage, she whispered, her voice eerily calm, almost serene. Now you got it? The basket swung in one fluid motion, oil arcing through the air like a golden ribbon, like Judgment Day wrapped in 350 degrees of liquid pain. Time slowed down the way it does in nightmares, each second stretching into eternity. She could see every droplet suspended in the air, could see Reggie's face beginning to change from confusion to horror, could see Isla raising her hands too late, always too late, the way everything in Tanya's life had always been too late. And then the screams started, inhuman sounds that would echo in her head for the rest of her life. Sounds that proved, beyond doubt, that she'd crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The oil hit skin and the world exploded into chaos. Reggie fell to the floor, his hands clawing at his face where the skin was already beginning to blister and bubble, his voice tearing itself apart as he screamed and screamed and screamed. Illa collapsed against the counter, her neck and chest covered in golden liquid that was eating through her like acid, her shrieks so high and piercing they didn't sound human anymore. The smell hit Tanya immediately, that horrible mixture of burning flesh and grease that would become the scent of every nightmare she'd have for years to come. She dropped the basket, the metal clattering against the tile floor, and just stood there frozen, watching what her hands had done. Watching two people writhe in agony because she'd finally reached the breaking point that everyone has but nobody talks about for the first time in 12 years. She felt something strange washing over her. Not rage anymore, not grief, not even guilt yet. Just this quiet, hollow peace, like the calm after a storm has destroyed everything in its path. She sank to her knees, hands trembling violently, tears streaming down her face as reality began to crash back in. I told you, she whispered, her voice broken and small. I told you not to make me the fool. Around her, the fluorescent lights flickered, the fryer continued its eternal hiss. And somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. The Burger King that had been her prison for 12 years, had just become the scene of her greatest crime and her most terrible liberation. Police would come, cameras would flash, the world would judge. But in that moment, on her knees in a pool of grease and tears and the destruction of everything she'd once believed in, Tanya Mitchell finally understood something she wished she'd learned a different way. Sometimes the only way to stop being invisible is to do something that makes you impossible to ignore.